today I just want to welcome you. I'm Ramsey Ford. I'm the director of the Tier 1 Performance Institute. We are the group that produces the Learning Trends Survey and Report, as well as a few other things we'll talk about towards the end of today's session. And I wanted to welcome you to the Path to Exemplary 2023 Learning Trends to Propel Your Team from Good to Great webinar. And with that, I'm going to hand it over to our host, Zach Ryland, to take it away and introduce our panel.
Really excited to be here. Thank you, everybody, for joining us. And thank you for spending the time invested in the report and learning trends. We've got an exciting hour here with some of our authors, our data crunchers, really just our team here from Tier 1 that does everything related to this learning trends report that we put out every year. And we're excited to introduce them to you. So if you don't mind, we'll spend just a couple minutes up front here introducing the team that does the work, introducing Tier 1, our company, if you're not familiar with us, and then we'll dig right into some of our findings, some of the things that surprised us related to the report. Dr. Will Thalheimer, would you start us off, sir? Would you just share with the group that we've got here a little bit about yourself and why you think this work is so important, and then we'll make our way through the group.
Sure. Will Thalheimer. I'm a principal here at Tier 1. And I am known for doing research-based learning design, spent a lot of time doing research and helping people build more effective learning interventions, and also, of course, learning evaluation. This work is well, it's sort of been a labor of love for us and this team. There's a lot of people behind this, not just those you see in front of you. We are learning professionals. We help people learn. And of course, we should be learning ourselves as well. And sometimes it's hard to do. We do it in a lot of ways. I'm a big fan of learning evaluation for that, looking at the learning research, et cetera. But sometimes it's important to spend time to reflect. So we spent a lot of time building this learning trends survey and diagnostic. And we did it with the goal of helping you reflect on your work and your learning team's work to enable you to nudge yourselves to think about things you might not have thought about, and to help you benchmark against the industry and against exemplary organizations. So I'm really loving this and love learning with the team, and look forward to having a great conversation today.
Appreciate that, Will. And of course, Walter, we'll move over to you. A lot of the brains behind some of our data, our numbers, analytics. Would you introduce yourself? And same thing, what do you kind of find interesting and what excites you about this work?
Thanks, Zach. Yeah, Walter Warwick. I'm a research director at Tier 1. My day job is actually spent developing computational cognitive models, human performance modeling generally. I'm not a learning specialist by training, but I spend a lot of my time trying to understand complex human behaviors, and learning is an example of that par excellence. So when Will and Zach looped me into these conversations, I jumped at the opportunity. I think it's wonderful to learn more about learning, but it's also wonderful to take our own medicine and figure out how best to sense what's going on in a complex and diverse field. So I guess, as Zach put it, I am one of the data crunchers on this, but I do have an interest in the larger project.
Thanks for that, Walter. Laura, you are a newer member of our team. If you would just introduce yourself to the group, and then, yeah, we'll get you excited about it.
Hi, everyone. I'm Laura Bacchus, and as Zach said, I'm new to the team this year, and it's been really fun to work on this. My background, I was trained in cognitive psychology, and I taught statistics and psychology at Ohio University and University of Cincinnati for a long time. And so this is really a great intersection of all my interests. I love learning about learning, and also about, how we think, how we behave, as well as the data behind it. And to Will's point, yes, we want you to be able to use this to benchmark and determine how to move forward. And I'm the type of person that if I'm going to make changes, I want to have evidence. I want to know that I'm doing it for a reason. And one of the really cool things about this report is that we have such a broad scope of information. And so you're able to look at information that's relevant to you, interesting to you, and make decisions about how to move forward with it.
Well said. Yeah, absolutely. Should be practical and helpful. Well, friends, thank you for joining us again. My name is Zach. I'll serve a little bit as your MC throughout this time. My background is both in learning and a little bit in education. Before I came to Tier 1 in consulting, I was also a psychologist. And if you know anything about that field, you're always interested in why people do what they do and what they're up to. So the learning trends and where we're headed as an industry is what excites me the most. Throughout this time, we hope to share with you some of our findings. There's a lot in the report, so we'll certainly encourage you to download it and go through it deeper. But we'll hopefully enter you into the conversation here today and should maybe be the start of how we can go through this data together and learn from it together. If you don't mind, let me just spend a minute or two introducing the company behind this work as well, in case you're not familiar with us. So Tier 1's an organization that was founded in 2002. We're really proud to be a super purpose-driven and mission-oriented company that is focused on helping improve organizations through people. So everything we do is related to people improvement, behavior change, and just driving the business outcomes that folks are looking for day in and day out. We're a certified B Corporation, we're employee-owned. And what we say at Tier 1 is we activate your organization strategy. So if you've got goals, priorities, initiatives that you're working on, broad strategy, we help bring that to life, and again, through people. And people commonly ask us, how do you do that? Or what does that look like? It happens usually in one of four really broad ways. We consult with organizations, we help design solutions. We're also happy to get in there and help build and develop solutions. And we look to enable the teams we work with. And the Tier 1 Performance Institute, this type of event is one way that we can enable you all to have more data at your fingertips and to help your teams do a little bit better in terms of performance as you move forward. Lastly, if you're just thinking where and how does Tier 1 activate strategy, like consult, design, build, still doesn't make a ton of sense, it might be one of these headers that is more familiar with you, whether that's onboarding projects, thinking about rewards and recognition, your wellness and mental health strategy. These are the types of projects where Tier 1 shows up and adds value for our clients. So we're excited because the Learning Trends report does every year gives a chance to see what's going on, hear from you, hear from our clients, hear from our own team members, and get to think about where the organization and where the industry is headed as a whole. So a quick snapshot of the report, and then we'll get into sharing a little bit of the findings. So for this year, we had 556 respondents. That's a huge increase, almost a 50% increase over last year's response rate. So just a big thank you for those of you here in today's webinar that took part in giving us your thoughts and your feedback. Also, you'll notice that our audience is increasingly global as we go through some of our findings, and as you get into the report itself, we're getting a bit of a worldwide view here. We have this year deepened criteria for what we consider exemplary organizations. It's something we'll talk about here in just a few seconds. And related to that, we have a new diagnostic that can help you think about how your organization compares to both respondents in general and also to those that we would consider exemplary. And lastly, the report itself has wide-ranging results. So it's a big report. It's almost 100 pages long. It has a lot of data and insights, but there are areas that you may want to go to help you get through it and parse it in different ways. So you might be interested in what's happening around learning methodologies or around the types of solutions that we're designing or how people feel about the economy and returning to work. There are all kinds of subsections in the report that will help you look at a few questions, look at some data related to those topics. So if you're coming to this webinar and you haven't yet seen the report, you can download that at the link down below. And of course, we'll place that in the chat. We'll be providing it for you throughout. So there's plenty of opportunity to go there. It's a big group, so the chat may be a little unwieldy inside of Zoom. What we're going to do is 2 or 3 times, we just want to give you a chance to give some of your input as well. So if you're on a computer, you can go to menti.com. If you're on your cell phone, you can do that, or you can just scan this QR code. If you'd head over there, we're going to come to our first question where we just want to give you a chance to lift up your voice. There's an 8-digit code there that you'll need when you go to menti.com. And I'm about to switch my screen over to Mentimeter. Don't fear, I'll put that code up in just a second. One more time for you, but here's that information, menti.com and that 4-digit code, or just scan the QR code on your phone. And I'm going to switch over there now just so you can see what we look like here. Let me go back to our welcome screen. If you'll just give us a thumbs up, a heart, a cat, or a question mark, you'll let us know that you're here and that you can see everything. And there's that information just up at the top of your screen one more time if you need that 8-digit code. All right, so you all can visually see we've got some folks jumping in here. It's a big group, so it may take folks a second to get technology. We'll hold off here just for another moment, and then we'll make our way to our first question. Looks like we've got about 30 folks so far. I'm giving it just a couple more seconds. All right, and at any point in time, you can join in with us. So please, if you're still getting logged in, that information will be at the top of your screen. This first question, just for reflection today, what's your intention for this webinar? Do you want to build general knowledge about trends? Are you looking for specific insights? You want to get takeaways that you can take back to your team? Or, are you looking to think about exemplary and how you benchmark your organization? Those are 4 big buckets. Give us your thoughts here and we'll just get a scan for what this group is looking for. All right, we've already got 50 people in there. Will, Walter, Laura, we've got our work cut out for us. About half of the group, general knowledge is helpful. Half of the group wants to get takeaways they can bring back. And then you can see some other small segments that are interested in how they can gain some insights or benchmark themselves. So thank you all for sharing that. We'll do our best to kind of hit those 2 big buckets every time we share a response or every time we share a little bit of the data. An interesting breakdown here. Look at this, 40, 40, 10, and 10, almost. All right, thank you. Again, if you're still voting, please put your vote in. This will continue to update live even as I take it down from the screen. And don't close your internet browser. Don't close your phone if that's where you have it open. We will come back to Mentimeter throughout our time. With that, though, I do want to hand it over to Walter Warwick, who's going to talk to us specifically about our exemplary organization. So let me do that. And Walter, let me hand it off to you, sir.
Great. Thank you, Zach. So if you could go ahead and get us to the next slide here. This notion of an exemplary organization is something, it's a construct that we developed on the basis of the 48, not all of them, but on the basis of responses to the questions. For those of you who have been on this journey with us for a few years, you'll know that we sort of overhauled the survey fairly significantly last year. It went from, I think it was a 14-item, mostly industry level sensing kind of survey to a much more detailed, much more granular polling of not just what's happening in the industry, but how workers are doing in the industry, what their day-to-day is like, what they work on, how they feel about the work they're doing. As we looked over that much lengthier survey, we actually last year identified a couple of questions that we thought were really closely tied to what it would be to be an exemplary organization. That was a wonderful tool last year for some cross tabulations and some deeper insights into the results we were getting. There were some limitations in how we constructed this last year. It was mostly a binary scale that we associated with 2 items from the survey. So this year we extended it to include the responses from 4 different items in the survey. We also went from the sort of binary, did they answer this question this way, to a numeric scale that allowed us to make finer distinctions. We also tidied up a little bit some of the cross tabulations. We had erroneously included one of our cross tabulations with the item that defined the concept. We were much more careful about that this year. So you'll see throughout the report that there are cross tabulations using this notion of an exemplary organization. So you can see here the items, and if you recall the survey, you can do the walk back to the specific prompts. But in general, we were interested in, first of all, were learning professionals able to conduct the appropriate learning evaluation? And this is sort of a subjective take. This is just something we asked you to tell us. Do you think you were doing the right kind of evaluation? We also asked how people were doing with their professional development. Were they getting good professional development on the job? I mean, it's our job to create these opportunities, but are we taking advantage of them ourselves? We asked people if they thought the work they were doing was actually making a difference. This is, again, sort of a subjective read, but it's important. No one wants to be working on sort of a Sisyphean, no progress kind of effort. So we asked that. And then lastly, we asked about the rigorous learning evaluation methods. You all who know Will know that he is a champion for this, and that so often we are tasked to build learning interventions. We work really hard on that. We don't always have good ideas if they're doing the right things. So we thought that it was a very important item to poll on people. So we took these 4 items, we pulled them together, we looked at the distribution of numeric scores that we had, and as we'll discuss a little bit later, there was actually a natural looking distribution here, and it allowed us to cut off a tail at about 10% of the respondents. So we identified roughly 10% of our 556 respondents as working for exemplary organizations. Again, this was aimed at individual respondents. So it is possible that we had 2 people from the same organization, and if they answered the questions differently, they might have ended up on different sides of that divide, but it still gave us a useful breakdown. So Zach, if you wouldn't mind going to the next slide. What does this look like? So I'm going to pull out a couple of the results that when we cross-tabulate all the responses, filter them by this sort of notion of exemplary and typical, so the top 10% of our organizations and the bottom 90, we ask people about their satisfaction with their work. And you'll see here that exemplary respondents, or those that we identified as exemplary, tended more to say, hey, I'm doing the best work of my career. This is a meaningful proxy for engagement and probably for the quality of work they produce. You'll also see that they're doing less of the meh work. We think this is important. This is important for the individual contributor, the individual professional, but it's probably important for their organizations as well. You don't want people working on crummy projects or stuff that they don't find rewarding. If you go to the next slide, please, Zach. So we asked people too about the economic impact. What has it been like through the last year in particular, but the last year was the last year of a fairly rocky period. And we asked people, what's the impact been on your organization? And here there isn't a major or striking difference between exemplary and typical, except for the voluntary churn. So this middle response here, and again, this is by numbers a fairly small subgroup within the overall respondents, but you see a very suggestive difference there, that people at exemplary organizations experience less voluntary churn. And in the era of the Great Resignation and quiet quitting, I think this is also an interesting finding. Next slide, please, Zach. All right, so this is another interesting, sort of surprising insight we got from people. We asked people about what did they expect from the economy going forward. So this first question, careful with the phrasing here, but we asked people, one of the responses here was, hey, are people on your team not paying attention to the economy? So you'll see that in exemplary organizations, there's a much higher a propensity to pay attention to the economy, much more so than the typical folks. And then you'll also see that despite the fact that people in exemplary organizations are paying more attention to the economy, they have a more optimistic outlook. This is interesting. I just read something on Axios yesterday talking about the actual reduction in job openings for professional services. We are perhaps on the cusp of a transformation in the economy, but this was an interesting view, paying more attention and yet still more optimistic. Right. Next slide, please, Zach. This was another result we looked at. We asked people to tell us what kinds of tools and methods they were either using in 2023 or things that they would be using anew in 2023. And in general, we saw lots of similarities between both organizations, but on average, people in exemplary organizations selected more of the options we provided them. We take this as sort of a proxy for a sort of a breadth of approach. It's not necessary that more is better, but when we looked at the response options we gave them, it seemed that people in exemplary organizations were drawing on a greater variety of tools and methods. And you can look at the numeric difference and debate whether more is always better, but it was a striking difference between the two groups. And then next slide, please, Zach. Finally, we asked about the innovation culture, and there were other cross tabulations, but the one I'm highlighting here, this follows on that question about how many tools and methods you use. It seems like the dual of innovation. In general, just again, the sort of high level grok of these results, you'll see that people in exemplary organizations tend to describe their approach to innovation in fairly constructive terms. So they have healthy innovations. They try to stay ahead of technology. They try to keep current with market trends. There was one interesting result here too, where people in exemplary organizations tended to think they were doing things more chaotically. When I've tried to parse this or to see into why this could be, it may be that in experimenting, if you're an exemplary organization, you may want to be like Laura, and you may want evidence to prove that this innovation is worth the wait. I don't know though here. This was the one part where it's like, well, you would think in an exemplary organization, everyone's on board with the innovation. Maybe, maybe not. So next slide, please, Zach. So here's kind of the summary of what you just saw. We think, based on these results and our own construct of exemplary, that people in those kinds of organizations have greater job satisfaction, a good thing, less voluntary churn, a good thing. They're plugged into more tools and methods. Also a good thing. Better innovation culture, a good thing. And this last point, again, I'll pause on this. I don't know whether optimism is a good thing or a bad thing, but at least there's awareness. So I guess we can revisit this question in the next year and see how things actually turned out. But anyway, that's a high-level gloss on how we constructed the notion of an exemplary organization, some of the sort of high-level findings when we did those cross tabulations. But you'll see this throughout the report if you go look at it. There, we use this to filter all sorts of results to gain better insight.
Walter, thank you for that overview. Appreciate it. And of course, those of you attending, please, if you've got thoughts or reactions, put them in the chat. Our team will help surface those, and we may have some chance to address those as we continue to go forward. I want to give you a really quick pause point here and take you back to Mentimeter just so you have a chance to process what Walter shared. So if you knew or if you joined just a couple minutes late, this is the information from Mentimeter. And for those of you that have been here, just flip back over into that browser tab where you had it. And let's go into this next question. So related to what Walter just shared, and really those four facets or those four elements that help define an exemplary organization, which of those is a strength of your organization today? And to be clear, we said Exemplary had a cutoff that was about 10% of organizations. So it's totally fine if you don't feel like one of those is a strength of your organization today. We gave you an option there as well. But take a second. Let us see a little distribution of what we have here in the webinar today. Some good data coming in. I think we might already say to ourselves, if you're attending this webinar, you're already skewing a little bit towards exemplary. So we're seeing some good results there. It's not 90% of you who don't feel like they have a strength there yet. Looks like professional development is the thing that, generally speaking, this group on the phone here does the best. Learning evaluation, you'll talk about later, always an area of opportunity where we can continue to improve. And then evidence of improved work performance, that's a tough one, right? There's a lot of factors in that. So you can imagine why that's a little bit lower. We're just shy of 100 responses here, so I will go ahead and move us forward for the sake of time and for discussion. But please, if you're still pondering this, if you're putting your answer in, feel free to continue. And again, like I said, even as I switch my screen back, this is still tallying here in the background, and these are results we can share out even after the webinar today. So with that, Mr. Will Tallheimer, why don't I hand it over to you to talk about kind of a part of the exemplary data and the looking that we did at that information and coming out to be our great places to work information. Let me hand it over to you for that, sir.
Thank you, Zach. And I love the exemplary thing. It's so cool. You have organizations who are claiming that they're creating good results with their learning. They're creating real work improvement. They've also got really good learning evaluation going on so that their assessments are based on evidence. And that just based on those few variables in professional development as well, we find that they're more innovative, et cetera. It's really quite remarkable. So one of the questions we thought you might want to know about, we know there's a lot of churn in our industry now. People are looking for new jobs. People are thinking about what's next for me. And so one question we thought we might be able to answer for you is, where should I go? What kind of organization should I look for? So we came up with this concept of great places to work. It's based on about 7 questions that are in the survey. And these are the questions that we might want to answer. Where we're most successful in creating effective learning. So these would be great places to work. Work from where we want to work, home or office, where we feel a sense of belonging with our teammates, where we're doing fulfilling work that fulfills us, where we can learn and grow ourselves, develop. Where our team is doing good evaluations so that we're getting good feedback loops that helps us learn and grow as well. And then one more, I think, where our team is more innovative. So these are some of the things we came up with, but we want to ask you, I think, Zach, do we have a Menta here? Awesome.
That's right, yes, sir.
These are some of our thoughts on what would make a great place to work, but we also want to think about your thoughts. What do you think? When you think about where you'd like to work, what are the criteria you would look for?
That's right. And so again, for those of you at this point, you're probably here, you have this open on a tab or in your phone. So if you'd head back to Mentimeter, this is one more question we'll do, and then we'll give you a little bit of a break. For you, to Will's point, what do you look for in a work environment? I'm going to start to bring up these answers here on the screen. And they'll kind of scroll around as people add them. So
Autonomy. I see autonomy there. Yeah. I've been reading this book called The Dawn of Humanity or something like that, and they talk about how important autonomy was for human civilization.
These are fantastic. A lot in here about purpose, Will. I don't know if the book gets to that, but whether it's impact, mission and vision and values, a lot of that there right alongside autonomy.
This is great. This is awesome. Thank you. And we will be able to compile these results and look at them to think about questions for next year that we might add as well. So thank you very much.
All right, Will, I'll move us back. But again, for those of you that are participating, please do put your answers in. I know it takes a little bit longer to type an answer than just to choose one of the multiple choices. So please put your thoughts in there. And to Will's point, we'll use this as inputs for continuing to refine the survey for future years. All right, Will, let me come back to your slide here where we're at, and let you talk about some of the data you found.
Okay, so what I thought I'd do is show you the data. I'm not going to talk over it too much, but we looked at these 5 organization types. So you can see those from left to right, non-learning businesses. So that's like most businesses. And then the learning vendors. So those are businesses that are focused on the learning and development field. Then the education space, the government space, and the not-for-profit space. Now, notice the percentage of respondents. So non-learning businesses was about 50%, learning vendors about another 25%, and then the rest are education, government, and not-for-profit. So I'm going to caution you a little bit about drawing too much from the education, government, and not-for-profit sectors, because those are relatively few respondents. All right, Zach, let's reveal the first row. So these were folks, this is how the percentage of respondents in each of these categories that's thought that their organization showed clear success in improving work performance with their learning interventions. And if you look at that, you can see we have a variety across the thing, but that the learning vendors really jump out. Now, Tier 1 is a learning vendor. So you might think we're cooking the books here, but let me just say that this could be a reality. This could be the way it is, or it could be that learning vendors, really feel that they need to be doing good work because they have customers to sell to, et cetera. All right, let's go to the next one. We are generally happy with our learning evaluation that we're doing. And you can see there's a wide variety. Government is the lowest, learning vendors are the highest. Again, the learning vendors there, maybe they feel they need to prove what they're doing. Maybe they need to create continuous cycles of improvement to improve what they're doing so that they can continue to sell. We don't know the reason these answers come up, but those are some of my hypotheses. Let's go to the next one. Innovation friendly. Okay. Again, there's a wide variety of responses. Learning vendors are at the lead, but again, not sure why. All right. You may have your own hypotheses to any of these, and so feel free to put your thoughts in the chat. So the next row has got beneficial professional development. So these are the people working in these organizations thinking about whether they got professional development. Learning vendors was the highest, although in other data we have, I'm not sure whether it's here or not, but learning vendors got the least professional development. So we're not sure what that is. All right, let's continue to the next row. Oh yeah, that's the one right there. And you can see that education, which makes sense, right? Their educators should be good at doing professional development and getting it as well. And not-for-profits also high. And we have one more slide with 3 more responses here. Positive connection to one's work group. And everybody's doing pretty well in that regard. Okay. And this is a question, some people like to work from home, some people don't. We put it on the work almost exclusively from home, and their responses, learning vendors were higher, but I will say that this varied tremendously across different regions of the world. So look in the report, see where you are. There's a lot of regional country differences in there. And our final response, I am able to do the most fulfilling work of my career. You can see folks in the not-for-profit space are the highest there, followed by learning vendors. So this is just some information that you may use to think about where you want to go for your next opportunity. I will say this, though. These are general categories. There's probably makes more sense or more of a difference if you look at the actual organization you're going to work for, not necessarily the sector. All right, I think that's it. Back to you, Zach.
Well said, Will, and appreciate that. And to some questions kind of coming up in the chat, we will send these information out afterwards. It's tough sometimes to be looking at a 5-column multiple road chart and to parse all of that information. It's our job to try to give you a high-level overview here in this time, but hopefully you'll be able to go much deeper on your own speed afterwards. With that in mind, if you've joined us for this webinar and the report in years past, historically we've tried to pull out data from the report, but a realization for us this year is just that it's a big report. We can't cover everything. So we want to dedicate just some of our time to conversation around the report itself. So we're going to welcome just the team that we have here from the Learning Trends Report to share a little bit about what they found during the process of creating, of going through the data, and then of course, reading the report results themselves. We'll talk a little bit about challenges. Most of those will be process challenges, but you'll hear a little bit behind the scenes. You'll also hear a little of the challenges in some of the results and the data that we received. We'll share with you some of our biggest insights and takeaways, some of our biggest surprises, and hopefully that'll expose you to some of the data as you're getting into the report yourself. So with that, we want to start first with just this challenge space. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to pull our screen presentation down so you can look at our presenters here for a moment as we go around and we just talk about this. Challenges is an interesting one, team, in that there was just so much data to parse, so much to get through. Walter, if you're okay with it, I might like to start with you in that one of the difficulties that I only know at a very shallow level that you could speak to is that this isn't measuring hard facts like the number of widgets that are coming down a production line. This is stuff that has to do with humans and it's hard to measure. Can you just speak to some of the challenge of trying to quantify these complex human space that we're working in today?
Yeah, Zach, thanks. As I hinted in the intro, this is a general problem I find interesting. So when I build human performance models, they're often a behavior and complex task domains where there isn't just a yes-no answer to be pulled from the domain. Similarly, when we're trying to understand how people are working in an industry or what they're doing, there's no sensometer that we can just go look at and say, oh, people are at a 60 on their job love scale. So we, by necessity, resort to methods like this, a survey-based method. As I'm sure everyone on this call knows, no survey survives first contact. You let it loose, it comes back, you start looking at the results and you're like, whoops, or did we really say that? Or did we give the same prompt twice? So that becomes immediately clear. And that, as you said, Zach, that's sometimes just a process thing. But you also start to understand the ambiguity that you baked into some of your questions, or that the analysis that you thought you could do, you can't quite do. Again, that's all process level stuff. But the more general question of what is it that we're trying to sense? And we're going to do this via a survey. We don't have those dials that we can just go look at for the industry. You want to make sure you're doing things well, but you also want to preserve some consistency from year to year. So I mentioned 2 years ago, we overhauled the survey. It went from a fairly lightweight sort of USA Today style, not to bust on my betters who originally created the survey, but it's much bigger, more substantial instrument now. We want to keep that as constant going forward so we can actually start to sense trends, but we need to keep tuning it and tweaking it and fixing it. So, so yeah, it's a combination of that sort of survey is hard, human behavior is hard. The two of them together are sort of like hard squared, I guess. So yeah, Zach, I don't know if that helps with the challenge space, but that's definitely what I perceive in my involvement.
That's wonderful. And I'm shying away now from hard squared. I think if you're in the audience, you don't want any more difficulty in your life than you already have. Will, maybe I toss it over to you for a quick second. you were kind of the vision behind expanding this instrument to make it more robust in the ways that Walter just described. Talk a little bit about that. I mean, I know we've been working to change the respondent group. We've been looking to make sure we have a balance of folks that are responding from a variety of spectrum across age, tenure, location, all of those things. Just share a little bit about what's kind of been easy for you, what's been fulfilling, and what's been a challenge in, expanding this survey as it was a few years ago.
Yeah, so if you filled out the survey and you felt a little fatigued by the 30th question, you can blame me. I think that's what Zach said. No, not true. First of all, it was a team effort. And, what we wanted to do was to, one of the things we ask about is trends and methods and some of the practical things you're doing in your design process, et cetera. And we wanted to add additional things in there that maybe people weren't seeing. That they could respond to. We added a lot of sort of research-based kind of things. We added stuff on learning evaluation. We got deep into that, professional development. So we really were thinking about, okay, let's think about this from the vantage point of learning professionals or learning teams out there in the real world. What would they want to know? What would be beneficial to them? So we expanded it that way. You'll notice as Walter was talking, you probably noticed, wow, these guys are talking about some of the struggles they're having here, some of the complexities of building a survey like this. And we really wanted to give you sort of some transparency there so that you can think about the data in meaningful ways. Too often, we get a fancy spreadsheet or a fancy graph, and we just, I think Daniel Kahneman has this great line, what you see is all there is. And it shows sort of this cognitive bias is what's in front of us is what we bound things in. And we want to go a little bit deeper than that. One of the things we wanted to do is to have a representative sample of learning professionals. And in the past, we've done that fairly well. We've got people from all different tenures in the field, age groups. We have people that are individual contributors. We have people that are leaders, senior leaders in L&D, middle managers in L&D, et cetera. In the past, we have not done a very good job of creating some global diversity. We've been mostly North American centric. So this year we made a concerted effort to recruit folks from Africa, South America, Asia, Australia. And we did a great job in that. I'm really proud of the fact that we have 9% of folks from Africa, 8% from Australia, New Zealand, Oceania, et cetera. It's and the survey went like up more than 50% of the number of people. So we're very happy with that. We feel like we have a really good representative sample of learning and development professionals from across the world.
Thank you for that, Will. And I know, to Will, your point, and Walter, your point, it will change the way we think of year-over-year data because that respondent base is always changing. But I mean, our goal, something you brought up in your introduction, Laura, is that this is applicable more than it is the most rigorous scientific tool ever, that it drives action. Can you talk a little bit about your thinking of like what's easy to drive action from a report like this, and maybe where it's still difficult to pinpoint how teams can take action?
Yeah, I think kind of building on what both Walter and Will have said already, is this survey perfect? Well, none is, but this is pretty good, right? Like we have a lot of questions. We have a lot of respondents. We had over 500 respondents, which is really amazing. And so while like I said, it might not be perfect, but it's going to give us a really good idea of what is actually happening in the industry. And because there are so many questions, you can really tailor it to the experience that you're looking for. And so is it something, are you interested in professional development? Are you interested in innovation? Are you interested in the types of deliverables that people are making? We have information on it, and we generally have several questions on it as well. So if there's one of those areas that you're interested in, you can go look at the data and try to make extrapolations based off of what is interesting to you, what are areas where you want to grow and develop. So again, I think that's one of the really big strengths on this, is that it's a really robust survey, and there's just a lot of really good information that you can tailor to what you're looking for.
Well said, Laura. And I'll put you on the spot a little bit here. Did any of the results spark anything for you that you just wanted to personally change or do differently in your own work or your own processes?
One thing that I think we're going to talk a little bit about this later too, the professional development piece is really interesting to me because there was a lot of really interesting data on that. And one of the things that even as Will was talking just a little bit ago, how the learning vendors, they said that they were not getting enough professional development. And this is again, one of the limitations where we aren't really sure why people are answering the way they are, is that the learning vendors aren't getting as much, or maybe they just want to get more, right? And so that's I am interested in kind of digging more into the professional development information because like I said, I think there's a lot going on that's interesting there. And it might also kind of tie into innovation and how companies innovate. As we're trying to innovate, we want to learn new things, right? Are we doing that through professional development, and how does that show up in our work?
Absolutely. There is a deep web here between, yes, professional development, innovation, and whether you're innovation friendly, this idea of new methods that you might be using in the organization, and to Will and his advocacy, whether you can even evaluate what you're doing. And do we have a data feedback loop that allows us to see whether our efforts have been successful or not? Well, let me turn us towards surprises here, just so we can get to some of that information. I'll actually open this first question up broadly to the team, and maybe Will, we'll look for you to answer first, just because you've been in the learning space in the industry for quite a while. One of the big surprises that I think came out for all of us in the report was that year over year, there are fluctuations in the types of methods that organizations use. Sometimes video is a little higher. 1 year instructor-led training might be a little bit higher. But generally speaking, these top 5 methods, e-learning, online ILT, video, classroom ILT, and self-guided learning, they're almost always every year at the top of that list. What are our reactions to that? Like, how do we reconcile that information with innovation, with changes to the industry, et cetera? And Will, if you're okay with it, I might look to you go first, but really this is for all 3 of you.
Well, when I saw this data, I said, whoa, the top 3 or 4, the top 3, I think, are all about online learning. And yes, classroom training did make a big rebound, right? Because in COVID, and during the pandemic, it was, we couldn't do it. It's moving up. I don't know if it'll move up again, but the fact that we have pivoted so broadly and so overwhelmingly to online learning is a big thing, right? We're now pioneers in this. We're trying to figure it out. We're trying to get better at it, but we're doing it. It used to be you'd have these arguments. No, everything has to be classroom training. It's the only way to go. It's the gold standard. Online learning is sort of a second cousin, but now we realize not necessarily.
That's a good take. And Will, I like that you're willing to show your age a little bit, that ILT was the gold standard and that, online learning has definitely moved into that space, just generally speaking. Walter, let me come to you. You don't, like you said in your introduction, you don't have this long-term L&D or learning field background. You've kind of come into it through work and consulting. What did that say to you, just as whether someone who looks at the data or as a consumer of learning in your own right? Did anything appear in your mind?
So again, not to be the meta data crunching guy, the biggest surprise about all of these results was that we could take something, a construct of our own design, this idea of an exemplary organization, and actually get a plausible distribution that turned out to be useful. That's not guaranteed. There's central limit theorems that tell you how things converge. But in this case, we actually saw something that suggested that the world of respondents did group in some sort of natural ways. And I guess natural and surprising maybe don't go in the same sentence together. But that to me was a nice post hoc validation of the construct. That was a surprise to me. I will just say, as a sort of amateur learning person on this team, what you started us off with the sort of constancy of the methods, having been a part of this survey now for a few years, that is striking to me. We do like to think of ourselves as innovative and experimental, but maybe we also just do what butters our bread. So
well said. And just to the point you're making, I'm bringing up some data that, again, you'll probably want to take some time to sit with on your own with more slower processing. But here you can just see some of what Walter is alluding to, this comparison of exemplary organizations versus the rest of the group, our typical organizations. And if you're looking at the top half of the screen in these charts, you're looking at those trends or methods that we were just talking about. Bottom half is the same thing, but trends or methods that you'll be using for the first time this year. So if you're just seeing there's some differences in that kind of bright blue, our exemplary organizations and how their percentages play out. And again, for first time use, things like chatbots or even integrating AI into the work, more likely in exemplary organizations than in our typical organizations. So just a way to even parse out some of that too. For the sake of time, let me move us forward. Laura, you hinted at professional development just a moment ago. I want to take us there for a second, and let me share a couple of the charts that are related for folks that are in the audience. So in the professional development space, some weird things occurred, right? One is people said, hey, I've taken part in professional development, but really low results here, really low data for those that would say they took some development that transformed the way they work. So that's one thing to hold in your mind. A lot of folks have budget for professional development, at least at some scale, whether it's $500 all the way up to $5,000 in a given year. But then again, we don't see people purchasing much professional development. The majority of professional development we see is general interest, things that you can find online, podcasts, books, websites, etc. So Laura, just to you, as you look across that data, those are some contradictions. They don't all line up. What came to your mind? What were you thinking when you saw some of those results?
Yeah, no, it is really interesting. And it makes me wonder, the people that, and this is something that maybe we can dig into with the numbers a little more, but the people that are saying things were completely transformational, what types of professional development are they getting? Because to your point, most of us are reading books, doing podcasts, which is good. And people seem to be pretty happy with it, but we don't have many people saying that their work is really transformed by it. So it's something where, again, it seems to be kind of a disconnect. We say we're happy, it might be kind of improving our work, but at the same time, it doesn't seem like we're quite hitting the mark in terms of what we could be doing there.
Well said. Yeah, absolutely. Will, let me turn to you really quickly on the professional development front. Another thing that was interesting, and I think that you will really respect as someone who's driven by research in every facet of your own life, sources of trusted information across types of businesses. It seems like scientific research, and especially scientific research that's compiled or summarized by others, kind of consistently showed here as a leading source for all business types. This had to have been encouraging to you, but did anything surprise you, or did you have any takeaways from it?
I was, I've sort of devoted my career to, looking at the scientific research on learning, memory, and instruction, compiling that, right, sharing that, supporting others who are doing that. And so this is kind of like, I've been hoping that this is going to be true at some point in time. And I've seen evidence of this the last 5 years or so. It's really bubbled up, right? But when 70% of our respondents say that scientific research is their most trusted source of information, that's huge, right? And there is a subtlety here. We gave them two choices. You could either read the scientific research yourself, or you could read the scientific research as it is compiled or research translated by others. And the second one is the one that people are doing. So they're reading books and articles by people who have looked at the research and then translated that into practical ways of thinking about it. But think about it, 70% of us think that scientific research is our top trusted source. Now that compares to sort of models and frameworks that have practical wisdom built into them, like ADDIE or LTEM, et cetera. That was at 58%. And then there's a whole bunch of other sources. So these aren't our only sources. We also look at people I work with, it's about 40%, qualitative research like surveys, like the Learning Trend Survey, about 40%, and trade associations, also about 40%. But still, the fact that scientific research bubbles up to the top is a very pleasant surprise for me.
That's got to be validating, right? If, like you said, that's in some ways you could say it's your life's work to make research informed decisions. It's got to feel good.
Well, and let me add that, so who are those sources that do the translation? Well, there's popular books like Make It Stick. There's a whole bunch of research translators. Clark Quinn's book on learning science is probably I think it's the top seller at ATD now. We've got Julie Dirksen, we got Patty Shank, we got Miriam Nealon, Carl Kopp, others as well. So there's a lot of really good people out there doing this work, and we should be taking a look at what they're up to.
That's right. Linda in the chat is just reminding us that if you've got the time, the competency, et cetera, going to the research yourself is always huge because, of course, people's interpretations may change based on what the original data was saying. But Will, to your point, I think there are some trusted names out there that can help us parse through all the data and all the research that's happening in the field. All right, friends, for the sake of time, I want to leave a little bit of space for Q&A from our group here that we have in front of us. So let's just close with a really quick hot take if you're okay with it. So just think, maybe a single sentence answer. I want to ask you three about just an insight, something that you kind of took away from the report, from the data, from going over it. So if you're okay with it, we'll just go round robin. I'll ask you for just one insight that you took away, or one thing that you're still processing, that you're thinking about. And let our audience hear it before we go on to some Q&A. Will, since we were just talking to you, is it okay if we just start back with you? What was one insight or takeaway that you had, just to summarize?
Well, I'm a learning evaluation guy. I couldn't help look at, we're not doing enough learning evaluation. Now, how do we know? I think it was 65% of people said they're not happy with the learning evaluation they're able to do. 65% not happy. That's us, not happy. Two of our most popular ways we measure are completion rates or attendance and learner surveys. And even though I wrote a book on learner surveys, those are not the only things we should be doing. And then the real kicker is when we ask people about their success in creating learning that supports on-the-job performance, only 6% said they had undeniable evidence of success. That's pretty low. So clearly we need to continue improving that. There are some signs in the data that we are doing that. More and more organizations are focusing on this, but we can still do more.
Well said, Mr. Thalheimer. Laura, what about you? Takeaway, something you're still chewing on or processing?
Yeah, I've also still been thinking a lot about this idea of personal connections that we have in the workplace and how in-person connection does seem to be rebounding post-COVID. But at the same time, going back to those top methods of learning still being online learning. So, we are having increases in how much people are connecting in the workplace. We do see some people working a little bit more outside of just their home. But at the same time, again, we're still relying really heavily on these online formats. So I'm curious to see, is this going to change? Is this going to, how is this landscape going to continue to evolve over the next couple of years?
Yeah, that's right. As if we haven't had enough uncertainty through COVID, we've got maybe a looming recession. Are you coming back to the office? Are you not? Lots to parse through there. Walter, how about you, sir? Just to round us out, an insight, a takeaway, something you're still noodling on?
Yeah, not to go too Charlie Kaufman on everything, but despite this kind of work being hard squared, and despite being the computational modeler in the crowd, I am a Luddite, and I look at this kind of work as a bulwark against all things big data and AI, thinking that all we have to do to gain insight is to take a huge pile of data and throw it in a machine and we'll learn. I think this kind of work is tremendously important because it's small data. It's human-centered. We're trying to direct thought, and we're not coming up with just absolute ironclad conclusions, but we're allowing people to think and focus on interesting areas. And this is one of the only ways we'll ever get there. With all due respect to OpenAI, ChatGPT is not going to give us the insight we need to understand learning professions. So
well
that's
said,
my
Walter.
screed.
Yeah, hard squared and small data problems. I think you're giving us a lot to continue to process, especially in the face of data and AI, everything that we're seeing trending in the world today. Well, ladies and gentlemen, we know we just scratched the surface on a lot of things that we could share and talk about and discuss in a really big and comprehensive report. We hope that you take the time to view the survey and really to process it. And we've got 3 suggestions on how you could take action. And one more Mentimeter question, and then we'll move to wrap up with just any final Q&A. So in terms of taking action, 3 really tangible things you can do. 1, just take the report, of course, but the additional step, discuss it with somebody. Discuss it with a member of your team, with a peer, with somebody that you trust over coffee, lunch, dinner, whatever it may be. Do what we're doing now. When you get in and process through the data, you'll find some things that are revealing that is not at the surface level of the data themselves. So we really encourage you to do that. There is a QR code here. You can go there for an online diagnostic, a survey, to start to look at how you and your organization compare to those exemplary organizations. So that was a big theme for us. Hopefully it can yield some information for you. And if you want to go further than that, you can schedule a private benchmarking assessment by reaching out to the Tier 1 Performance Institute. And you met Ramsey at the start of this talk today. His email address is listed down there below. He'd be happy to set you up with that kind of discussion. All right, last thing, we want your voice. We want to know, hey, do you want more webinars? Again, this was just scratching the surface of all the data that's in this report. If you would like more, what would you like that to be on? So if you head back to that Mentimeter that you had open earlier, we've just got one final question for you to reflect on. And that really is, what other sections of the report, what other trends, what other things in this learning space would you like to see us discuss and to discuss with you? If you don't mind, give us your thinking here. That'll help tee up if we do more webinars in the future. And if we do, what the topic will be for those. So I'm going to start showing the answers here, and then we're going to move our way into just a closing and some Q&A time. So if you haven't entered a question in yet in the Zoom functionality where you can put some Q&A together, if you haven't put anything in the chat, please feel free to do that too, and we'll do a little bit of discussion. And look at this here. Again, it always takes more time to type these than the quick multiple choice answers, but some good stuff. Learning methods and blending. I saw some DE&I answers, of course, evaluation and impact. Yeah, even some meta stuff, practical ways to do some of the things that are coming up in the report. So let's go on that journey together. All right, I'm going to move us forward again for the sake of time. I know you're probably still typing your answer into Mentimeter, but please don't stop that just because I'm going to take this down from the screen. We'd love your input and how we can continue to move forward together in the future. All right, last but not least here, let me turn it over to Ramsey to just talk about two things that we have coming up inside of Tier 1 that may be valuable to you if you found this valuable. And then again, we'll wrap with Q&A. Thank you, everybody. Ramsey?
Hey, thank you, Zach, and thank you to everybody. Great conversation to listen in on. I hope everyone that signed in today enjoyed it. Wanted to talk a little bit about XLearn. So XLearn is a conference that we put on through the Tier 1 Performance Institute. It happens in late September in Cincinnati, Ohio. It is a really exciting space where we bring together leading thinkers, put together some really fascinating workshops, have a lot of fun. And because you signed up and joined this, we currently are running 20% off of those XLearn tickets. So please check that out using the link on the QR code in the slide. And obviously, we'll be sending these slides out again to you, so you'll be able to access this at a different point. And then next slide here. Also, if you enjoyed this, we are doing a similar, not webinar, but more of a live stream event later in April, really focused on generative AI and the future of work. So if that's a space that is a hot topic and interesting space for you, please join Zach and this panel of experts to talk a little bit more about the impacts on the world and specifically the L&D field, what it could mean for all of us moving forward. So thanks again for everyone for being here, and Zach, right back to you.
All right, appreciate that. We'll spend some time here, and I know some of you may have to start to float away, but we'll spend some time wrapping up with Q&A. Ramsey, I might look to you first to just say, has anything come up in the chat or just been captured in the Q&A submissions that are worth us starting with here?
You know, I think a lot of the questions were responded to during the process. There were some really great things. A lot of good comments coming in there. Really interesting about the idea that a lot of people have moved from higher ed and education spaces into learning over the past few years. And then some fun hypotheses coming in around you know, why the learning vendor space might have performed the way it did in some of the data capture and great places to work.
That's good discussion. I know I saw one question come in that maybe Walter, Will, and Laura will just kind of throw to you for fun, which is Tier 1 going to change anything about itself related to the best places to work data and the stuff that, Will, you shared at the top? I don't know if any thoughts come to mind there, but Will, I might look to you just in case you have a response because you looked through a lot of those results.
Well, as I actually responded to that comment in the chat, I said, well, we actually got the report done like less than 48 hours ago, so we haven't really had a chance to socialize it to our leadership, but maybe get there. We did, with a small subset of our learning team last year, we did take a look at last year's data and thought about it. So we think this is a great diagnostic, and we're planning to use it ourselves.
Yes.
And I'd also just throw in that I don't think it relates to this data because it happened shortly before there, but Tier 1 did extend and add to everyone's professional development budgets at the end of last year, which is on trend with what we're seeing these exemplary organizations doing.
That's exactly right. And Will is awfully modest, but he's leading some big efforts inside of Tier 1 just to help us think about our own upskilling related to learning evaluation, related to how we think about data and feedback with our clients. Walter's doing something very similarly with our clients and leading them and thinking about big and small data and how we bring it to use. So I think, at least for us, these data have already been helpful in shaping our opinions last year, and I'm sure they will this year. Friends, I'm not seeing anything else in the chat related to questions. If you have any last minute responses, please let us know. Otherwise, we'll start to begin to wrap up here. I know there's about 70 of you left here at the top of the hour.
One thing we should point out was this survey was up and running in December and January. This was before generative AI was a hot topic, and yet it still came up in our results. So there's some wisdom in the L&D field of people knowing what's coming. I think next year probably it's going to be the #1 thing we see, but we'll probably ask some specific questions about that next year. Every year we try to focus on a few topical things. This year we focused on the economy because that seemed to be in the headlines. I think next year is definitely going to be on generative AI, ChatGPT, etc.
Wow. Yeah, I sure hope so. That'll be a lot of fun. And I was going to say, Walter, I know you'll have a lot of opinions there. All right, everybody. Well, thank you so much for attending today. We know, again, with the professional development theme, it's not always easy to find some time to dig into something like this. So thank you. We will take all of your thoughts and feedback into discussions about what other types of webinars and conversations we bring forward. But until we talk to you again next time, please thank you for just joining us today. Thank you for participating in the conversation. Thank you for what you're doing in your own organizations in the industry. It may not be seen all the time, but as we can see in the data, it really is driving us forward, and we appreciate it. So take care, everyone. Have a good day. Have a good weekend. And we hope to see you on the next event that we're putting on.
Thanks, everybody, for coming. Great to see so many familiar names.